Welcome to Horse Council of BC's Emergency Preparedness for Horse Owners, Module 3, Part 2 of Response. In this module, we are going to cover evacuation and animal health. This section is going to provide an overview of emergency first aid for horses. Injuries, distress, and pain can be difficult to detect in livestock, including horses. As prey animals, they instinctively try to mask any outward signs of pain, as this makes them vulnerable to their predators. The photos on the side show how horses may express pain through subtle facial expressions. The lack of visible emotion does not mean the animal is not in pain or suffering. When handling injured animals, if the animal cannot rise or walk, by law it must be treated where it is or euthanized on site. If the animal meets the definition of unfit, it can only be transported under the guidance of a veterinarian to receive care. If an animal is injured but can move, work slowly and quietly around it. Scared and injured animals can be very dangerous and unpredictable. If an animal has a halter on, or you are able to safely put a halter on, be very careful when leading it. Walk slowly and talk calmly to the animal. If they are loose, walk calmly to the left side of the animal to catch it or lead it. And never yell or chase the animal. You will just further frighten them. If it has been determined the animal should not be transported and a veterinarian has been called, large animals are best left where they are until the veterinarian arrives. If the animal is able to walk, try to get it to a safe area until it can be attended to. If the animal needs to be moved for treatment or euthanasia, it should be moved the shortest distance possible. And if the animal cannot get up and needs to be euthanized, it'll be necessary to destroy it on site. There may be circumstances where first aid needs to be applied while waiting for the animal health specialist, either a veterinarian or animal health tech, to arrive. Ideally, anyone that may need to provide first aid will have some level of equine first aid training. Emergency first aid should be applied if the animal health specialist is not available or until they arrive and can tend to the animal. For basic first aid for an animal with an open wound or laceration, you will want to apply pressure to the laceration or wound to stop the bleeding. Open wounds or lacerations can be wrapped with sterile pads and secured with an ACE bandage or a product like Vet Wrap. Diapers, sanitary napkins, or towels can also be applied to limit blood loss, especially in cases of a wound with profuse bleeding. For animals with broken bones, such as a broken ankle, leg, or shoulder, or one with mobility issues, they should not be moved until a veterinarian can attend to it. An animal with a broken leg, ankle, or shoulder cannot be transported unless under the care of a veterinarian and directly to the location to receive care. And an animal that is having trouble standing up or walking should only be moved or transported under direction of a veterinarian. Burns occur when animals have been exposed to fire or electric shock. Burns cause extreme pain, and animals should be handled with extra care. And understand that the risk of shock is very high. All animals that were exposed to embers should be hosed off to prevent further burns. If a horse has been burned, after getting it to a safe zone and calming it down, cold water should be gently poured over the burned area for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. When burns are extensive, meaning they cover most of or the entire body, or they are severe, such as burns that are deep down to the bones and muscles, the animal should be humanely destroyed as soon as possible. As with humans, do not apply oils or lotions, and do not prick the blisters, touch, breathe, or cough on the injured area. Horses need to be closely monitored as they have a delayed reaction to smoke inhalation. And if they have a nylon blanket on, be very careful when removing it, as the blanket may have melted to the skin of the horse and will require to be cut off and the melted pieces removed by a veterinarian. All horses should be examined by a veterinarian after a rescue and monitored for several days post-rescue for health concerns. We are now going to address the difficult discussion on euthanasia. Euthanasia is inevitable when you have animals. There are many situations where the optimal treatment for an animal will be to euthanize it. The chances of multiple animals requiring euthanasia is even greater during an emergency event. All horse owners need to be prepared for not only having to euthanize their animals, but also for disposing of the dead stock. Conditions that meet the criteria for euthanasia include, but are not limited to, broken limbs, broken backs, internal bleeding, large gaping wounds, and burns. It is every owner's responsibility to ensure their horse has a humane end of life, including the timeliness of euthanasia, to avoid any further suffering for your horse. Acceptable methods of emergency euthanasia of horses include gunshot, captive bolt guns, and barbiturate overdose by a veterinarian. Considerations when choosing the method include it must be readily available, the person able to perform the method must be readily available, animal type and age, the means of disposal of the carcass, and the total number of animals that require euthanasia. Gunshot and captive bolt gun are the best choice, as they are both humane and have no restrictions in regards to disposal, unlike barbiturate overdose. The chosen method must be readily available and applied by a trained and knowledgeable person. If emergency euthanasia of a horse is required when an animal health specialist is not available, or the animal health specialist does not have the means to euthanize it, you may be required to do it yourself, but only if you are skilled in this area. This diagram shows you the correct location for the application of gunshot or captive bolt gun for euthanasia. Animals may perish during an emergency event, and they must be disposed of. As part of your disaster preparedness plan, you should make yourself aware of the requirements for storage or disposal of dead stock per the Code of Practice for Agricultural Environmental Management. A temporary holding or disposal site may be identified by your local municipality during an emergency event. No matter what, though, you should always work with your local municipality on dead stock disposal methods. For Section 3, we are going to cover evacuation. Overland flooding and forest fires are the most likely events in BC to require evacuation. We will walk through evacuation preparation and active evacuation in the next several slides. What is a state of emergency? The most frequently cited reasons to declare a state of emergency is to facilitate the mandatory evacuation of people and livestock, and to allow access to private property when public safety is threatened. Declaring a state of local emergency enables the local authorities to exercise the emergency powers listed in the Emergency Program Act shown on the side of the screen. These emergency powers allow the local authority to order the evacuation of residents from their homes, to prohibit travel, and allows them to enter private property when an emergency threatens lives, property, or the environment within the local authority's jurisdiction. We will now discuss state of emergency definitions. An evacuation alert is usually issued as soon as a threat is identified and to areas that may be impacted. An alert means you should be ready to leave on short notice. An evacuation order means you should leave immediately. Choosing to remain in an area under an evacuation order could put yourself, your family, and first responders in danger. An evacuation rescind means the local officials have confirmed the situation is now safe and you can return home. First and foremost, as soon as you know there is a chance you may have to evacuate, you need to start preparing. Do not wait until the last minute, especially when animals are going to be evacuating with you. Preparing for evacuation. First, organize how you are going to evacuate. If you need to bring in outside trailers, you will need to start contacting those you have identified for your trailer on your emergency preparedness plan. If you are using your own trailers, you will need to get it hooked up to your truck and ready to go. You should do an inspection of the trailer to make sure it is roadworthy, and make sure your towing vehicle is full of gas. Load any supplies that you have identified you may need. This could include hay, water buckets, extra halters, first aid kit, any medications your horse may need, and emergency contact information. You will want to make sure that you also have your proof of ownership and horse identification information with you. Confirm with your designated evacuation site that they will be accessible and able to house your animals. And if your horses are out on pasture, bring them into a corral close to the loading area for accessibility when you need to load. If you are going to leave animals behind to shelter in place, make sure they have what they will need before you leave. In the case of a flood or fire, do not lock them up or tie them where they will not be able to get away from the flood or fire. Many horses have drowned in flood conditions or died in fires, locked in their stalls or corrals, unable to get away. They will need access to water and feed if longer than 24 hours. You will also want to make sure your horse or horses has some form of identification on them. This is for both the horses being left at the farm and ones going to an evacuation site. Identification can be a luggage tag or ear tags braided into their manes or tails with your contact information on it. You can also spray paint your phone number on your horse as seen in this photo. And make sure you leave emergency contact information on your front door and include on it how many horses have been left behind and where they are. It is go time. It's time to evacuate. If you have properly prepared for evacuation, it should be an efficient and safe process. You should have all your supplies loaded up and both the truck and trailer ready to go. If someone else is providing transport, make sure you inspect their trailer before loading your horses to make sure it is safe and roadworthy. Ideally, you will have a travel partner. If you do not, make sure someone knows when you are leaving, what route you are taking, and where you are going. All regulations pertaining to the transport of animals in Canada, as outlined in the Health of Animals Act Part 12, must be followed, including, but not limited to, the loading of only fit animals, segregation of incompatible animals, such as ponies cannot be in the same compartment as full horses, the safety and condition of the trailer, and the prohibition of overcrowding of animals. It is your responsibility to familiarize yourself with these regulations. You are ready to start loading. Quietly and calmly load your horses into the trailer. Remember, only horses that are fit to transport per the Health of Animals Act Part 12 can be transported. Once loaded, secure all gates and doors on the trailers and do one more walk around to inspect the vehicle. Provide any documentation to the other transporters that may be needed at evacuation, including ownership information on each horse. Loading is complete and you're ready to hit the road. If you are leaving any horses to shelter in place, do one more check of them and that they have everything they need before you leave. Notify the evacuation site that you are on your way and confirm with them how many horses you will be bringing and ask if there is any special instructions you need to know, such as where the unloading area is. Also, reconfirm the location and the route that you are to take to the site. Obey all rules of the road. Only travel on roads that are open. Do not disregard any roadblocks. And do not travel on any at-risk roads, such as roads that have begun to flood, or take any shortcuts. Upon arrival at your regional evacuation site, be respectful and follow the instructions of the volunteers. Only park and unload in the areas designated for that. Ask for instruction on where to put your horses, and provide any necessary information about your horses. The site may require that you provide proof of ownership and have you fill out intake sheets. If you are supplying your own feed and water, ask where you can store it. You may be required to prep your stalling area before unloading your animals. The volunteers should be able to guide you through this process. Inspect the area to make sure there is nothing that poses an imminent threat to your horse, such as large nails sticking out or an area where the horse could get stuck. You may be required to do some quick repairs. And once your horse is settled, check with organizers on if they have a place for you to park your trailer if you need to. As stated previously, always be respectful of the volunteers and the other horse owners present. Remember, everyone is in the same situation as you are and only want what is best for all animals. If you are evacuating to a private facility, upon arrival, inspect the area to make sure that it is safe for your horse and that they will be effectively contained. Depending on the type of facility, you may need to clean and bed your stalls. If your evacuation site is a pasture, check the fencing and gates before turning the horses out. Locate the water source so you are able to fill your water buckets or troughs and get your horses settled in. Find the area where you can store your feed and any other supplies you brought with you. Take photos of any damaged or broken equipment so you have record that your animals did not do the damage. And if you are not staying at the site with the horses, make sure you leave your emergency contact information with the site owner or posted where people will be able to see it. We will now do a quick review of Module 3's key points. You may face the difficult decision to euthanize your horse. Do not lose sight of the fact that you need to do what is best for your horse, no matter how hard that decision may be. Know ahead of time where and how you are able to dispose of dead stock if required. As soon as you know there is a chance you may have to evacuate, you need to start preparing. Do not wait until the last minute, especially when animals are going to be evacuating with you. And be respectful of volunteers and the other horse owners present. Everyone is in the same situation as you are and only want what is best for all animals. We have reached the end of Module 3. You can now proceed to the final module, Module 4, which will cover recovery.